Women Radio 91.7. My name is Kiki Mordi, and this is Women of 1325. All right. International Day of World's Indigenous People is part of what we're going to be discussing today. Women, indigenous structures, and peace building, and of course, we're looking at some lessons from the indigenous methods. So, what is this program about? The United Nations, through various resolutions, recognizes the disparate impact that violent conflict has on women all over the world. You know, it has highlighted the fact that generally women have been left out of the peace processes of reconstruction and, of course, of stabilization efforts. Just yesterday, we carried the news that, we told on the news that South Africa has made a historic stride incorporating women in peace talks. The United Nations has recognized the imperative for the full and equal participation of women at all levels, ranging from conflict prevention to post-conflict reconstruction, peace and security. We'll be talking about these things today on the Women of 1325. The topic is Women, Indigenous Structures and Peace Building. Again, my name is Kiki Mordi. You are locked in and listening to WFM 91.7. Be a part of this conversation by tweeting at us. Use the hashtag Women of 1325 1325. And of course, you can send a text 07031756537. That's a text or a WhatsApp message. The number is 07031756537. The phone lines will be opened in a short while, but there are resolutions amongst a host of others that usually frame women, peace, security agenda. Now, Women of 1325 is that summary, is that radio program that hopes to attain gender inclusivity from the female gender, of course, protection and equality. All right, on that note, today on Women of 1325, we'll be discussing women, indigenous structures and peace building. And I'll be doing that today with a guest, Mrs. M.M. Okun, who is the Executive Director of Kebekache Women Development and Resource Center. We'll be reaching out to her in a short while. She'll be joining me shortly on the program. Last week on Women of 1325, there was an elaborate discussion on UNSC Resolution 2250, Youth, Peace and Security Agenda. It stated that this resolution identifies 5 key pillars for action. There is participation, protection, prevention, partnership, and disengagement of reintegration. Now, this landmark resolution urges member states to give youth a greater voice in decision-making at the local, national, and regional levels, international levels as well, and to consider setting up mechanisms that will enable young people participate meaningfully in peace processes. How do we replicate that, for women to have an equal participation? I'd like to welcome our guest, Mrs. M.M. Okun, the Executive Director of Kebekache Women Development and Resource Center. Good afternoon, ma.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you on the program this afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are in the week of International Day for World's Indigenous People. And talking about indigenous people are inheritors and practitioners of unique cultures and ways, relating basically people that have been unique, who are from an environment. They have retained social, cultural, economic, and political characteristics that are different from the ones that we see that are dominant all over society. And despite cultural differences, indigenous people from all around the world, they share one common problem, and that is protection of their rights as distinct people. It's all around us. The examples are all around us. We have them internationally and we have them locally. Indigenous people, they've sought recognition for their identities for a long time, for a way of for their culture, for their rights to traditional lands, territories, natural resources for years. Yet, throughout history, their rights have always been trampled on. And indigenous people of today are arguably among the most disadvantaged and vulnerable groups of people in the world. And we're going to be basing our subject matter on that preamble. All right. So, Ma'am, can you tell us, just give us an insight on who these indigenous people are?
Yeah, thank you very much. You have already given a very elaborate explanation about who indigenous people are. They are native people, ethnic group, original settlers who have their own peculiar cultures and who always stand the risks of other people trying to dominate them, take over their land, and trying to push them out of their original settlements. And we have indigenous people all over the place. In fact, all of us, we are indigenous people, apart from the fact that most of us have moved from our own native land and we are now living in urban centers and metropolis. But then we still have people who are there upholding this clear culture and tradition. Yeah. And in the Niger Delta we live and work, we have the Beni people, we have the Bidio people, we have the Anang people, where I come from. All these people are indigenous people. And a lot of people are still there trying to sustain the culture of the people, the language, the dialect,
the lands,
the way of dressing, the way of these people.
All right. I would, just to divert our attention a little bit, a couple of these indigenous people occupy lands that, we have the example in Lagos where there were forced evictions that took place in various rural settlements close to the waters. And these people lost their homes. These are indigenous people of Otodogbame, for example, and they lost their homes. What does the government have a responsibility of making sure that while we want to transform our states into mega cities, not just Lagos, every other state, while we want to transform our states into mega cities, do they have a responsibility of the preservation of these indigenous people and their communities?
Yes, actually government has a responsibility towards sustaining people's cultural rights and sacred places. But this also has been the trait for indigenous people because civilization and what we call development is actually fast eroding all these things that we preserve and we hold dear, and actually the things that is the values of the society. And this is why people feel that because these values are changing, that is why we are suffering a lot of things that are suffering in the society, high incidence of crime, robbery, kidnapping, violence, because those values are no longer being upheld or respected the way they used to be. And this is also why the indigenous people have the right to exercise their right to self-determination. Because when government is taking over their homeland, or maybe corporations are taking over their homeland, nobody is actually paying attention to the fact that people's rights are being violated. That people have the right to sustain their culture, people have the right to sustain their land, their indigenous positions and rights to keep those things that make them remember that they actually have the heritage, the past, not just modern development, capitalism, acquisition of wealth, and all that. So they have that right to keep their land, their resources. And we also find out that it is these places that we call indigenous people that actually have the natural resources that the corporations are extracting and using it to make profit and accumulate wealth, which is actually the simplest definition of development. So in most cases, when we talk about development or sustainable development, if you really look at it, it is like it's resulting in destruction.
Development, but at a cost. At a cost of destruction of indigenous people.
Yes.
All right. So capitalism, as you say, is one of the things that really take one of the culprits, let's put it that way, of the dissolution of these communities of indigenous people. I'd like to see how women are affected, right? I'll still give us the example of the one that happened in Lagos, where a lot of indigenous people were forcefully evicted. A lot of women lost everything. There was a story of a woman who lost her son, her husband, lost her son right there in conflict, lost her husband a few weeks later, and she literally has nothing. And women are the biggest sufferers, as I've said in the introduction, when it comes to when it comes to peace and instability. So what can the government do? You say the government has a responsibility. What should they do, and how can they protect the people, especially the women?
The government has signed on to so many human rights frameworks at the national, the regional, and international level. If government respects all those human rights frameworks, the first thing is to recognize that the indigenous people are also human beings and they have rights.
Okay.
When we talk about indigenous people suffering from acquisition of their land and also exploitation of their natural resources, it is also the same thing that we suffer here in the Niger Delta, because if you look at where the oil is being extracted, it is indigenous people that are being affected, particularly the women. The women suffer oppression from the hands of government, from the hands of corporation, and also from the hands of traditional rulers who
their
are
own
also
people
upholding the culture of the people. And somehow culture discriminates against women. Culture excludes women from decision-making processes. This is why when we talk about peace building, we talk about the rights of women to participate in peace building in their communities. So if we look at what the women are suffering in the Niger Delta, just something similar to the example you have given about Lagos. Traditionally, women are farmers and women are fisherfolk. So oil companies coming to extract oil, they are devastating the farmland. And then women don't have access to land. They don't hold land titles. But they are the ones farming on their father's land, on their husband's land. If something happens to the land, negotiations are made with the men who hold the land titles and not the women who are farming on the land. Yes. So in the first place, they are displaced from that means of livelihood. And then if we also look at the fishing occupation, it is women who are doing subsistence fishing. And when the land is polluted, the seafood that they use to sell and keep their families, they are also being displaced from those traditional means of livelihood. And we also look at the violence we are experiencing in the Niger Delta, the conflict between companies and communities. Over the past decades, a lot of lives have been lost. And it is women who hold the family together. When the husbands are killed, it is the woman who suffers. When the sons are also being affected, it is the woman who suffers. The girl children and the girls are also suffering one form of human rights violation or the other. So you look at a situation where the woman is being impacted from all angles. And in all these things that is happening, the woman is not part of negotiation. The woman is not part of decision making. So it is difficult for the woman to even actually influence anything in her favor. And women usually make efforts and initiatives to involve themselves in mediation, in taking action to make peace. Most of the time, it's not really for themselves as women. They look at the general interest of the family and the interest of the community. So the woman is actually at the center of everything.
All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Okon. It's 15 minutes past 3. This is Women of 1325 right here on Women Radio 91.7. My name is Kiki Mordi, and today we are discussing women, indigenous structures, and peace building. Of course, my guest today is Mrs. Okon, Mrs. M.M. Okon. She has spoken so well on indigenous people and how, these how lack of peace affects them in so many levels, and how it's so important to involve more women in different levels of peace building. You spoke on women who depend on fishing for livelihood and how they are excluded when policies come about. There's a documentary, Life at the Bay, spoke about the women, who live on Takwa Bay. These women go out at sea to fish so they can feed their families. Okay, so now I want to take us back to the government. I want to take us back to their roles in all of this. You have spoken so well on what they need to do to protect women, what they need to do to ensure that there is continuity, involve women. Now, how about the indigenous structures? What given structures has been put in place already to ensure that women are participants, and not just in the peace building process, in the whole process of mediating, governance even? Are there any structures that have been put in place?
When we look at indigenous structures or community governance systems, women are also being excluded. That is the reason we have the numerous human rights framework, including the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which actually empowers women and girls to participate in peace processes in their communities.
Okay.
And Nigeria is also signatory to this. We have the National Action Plan. Now we have the National Action Plan 2. And so many states in the Federation also have state action plan. But then it does not begin and end with having an action plan.
All right.
The action plans have to be implemented.
Okay.
And every stakeholder at all levels of government has to be part of that implementation. But even though we have this framework and the various national action plans, indigenous women in their own space have been carrying out certain initiatives to promote peace building in their communities.
Right.
Because, of course, we know they are excluded from government, they are excluded from community governance structures, they are also excluded from family decision-making processes. Because most times, the woman has to take permission
from the
either
husband,
from the father or from the husband before engaging in certain processes, even attending women meetings. But then, women, because of empowerment and the campaigns by the women's rights movement, women have to go beyond these limitations and restrictions.
Okay.
And they have actually taken that initiative to engage with indigenous structures for peace building.
All right.
A lot of communities have their own different levels or bodies for indigenous governance system, which also has to do with peace building. In some places, you have the age grade, you have the women group, you have the traditional rulers council, you have the community development committee, and there are actually certain groups that have indigenous names. I may not be able to mention all of them.
All right.
So what women do is engaging with these structures, what can actually be done. And in my years of working with community women to promote peace building in the Niger Delta, as far back as 2007, I have worked with women in Ogoni, women in Abuloma, and women in Emowa, who mobilized and took a day out to embark on Mothers for Peace rally. And they were singing in local dialect, actually taking advantage of certain traditions in their communities.
All right.
It's kind of invoking this tradition and bringing it to the attention of traditional rulers. That people are killing, women are being raped, a lot of things are happening to women and to their family members. And why should the community governance structures ignore the tradition that promotes peace building and allow violence to reign in the community? So it's what women did. Even this year, WANEP has 10 women in River State, including women in Eleme, and they actually identified the female chiefs, and they mobilized and they invited the female chiefs, sensitized them on the need for the female chiefs to take the responsibility and use their activities to engage with the traditional rulers council to ensure that the violence that women are experiencing in their communities should be addressed. And that actually made the paramount ruler and his council to wake up and call the groups to action. And there are certain traditional actions that they took to ensure that whoever is involved in kidnapping, is involved in violence, is involved in cultic activities, that those traditions will be invoked against certain persons. Not that the violence has stopped, but it has made some people to have a rethink about their involvement in violence.
Is there a level of accountability when it comes to these communities? As you mentioned, some parts of the tradition disempowers the women, but there are aspects of tradition that need to be upheld that create a safe space, for women in these communities. And there are lessons to be learned. Some communities haven't implemented these frameworks, and some of them have, Nigeria is a signatory to many of these action plans and all of that. But when it comes to implementation, how deep have we gone? Are we at the surface level, or have we gone down to the roots?
When it comes to implementation, there's a lot of challenges. I don't think many people are playing their role. This is actually the reason we are mobilizing women at the community level to begin to engage with stakeholders.
But how about, stakeholders within the government? Everyone has a role to play. We have, the roles of the people. The non-governmental organizations also have a role to play. But the government has a huge stake in this, and they have roles to play. And with lack of representation, that with lack of women in government, how deep do they go in trying to solve these problems?
When it comes to holding government accountable, most of the government ministries and departments have a role to play in peace processes, in the implementation of their various responsibilities in the ministries. When it comes to the level of government, community level women or indigenous women to access certain ministries, like maybe answer to the governor on conflict resolution, at level it is difficult. And so it is necessary for society who have established to create that linkage and relationship between the indigenous women and the culture, which is also one of the things done in Rivers State. Wanted training the community women and bringing Ministry of Women Affairs into the training to create that linkage. So that we are so working
Hello, Mrs. Okon, please can you repeat your last sentence? We lost you there for a moment. Hello?
My last sentence working with the State Minister of Women Affairs.
Okay, yes, go ahead, please.
To assess the implementation of the State Action 25 in the state. Because the action plan is there, the action plan nothing will be done. Women will be excluded from peace building processes. But there's also another challenge to getting the action plan implemented. In several ways, it is also obvious that one way or the other, the elite class, the political class, also play a role promoting violence in the state and in the community.
How so?
Which is also an aspect that is making it difficult for women to engage in peace building. Because these are people who are supposed to implement policies and implement the action plan. But even in cases where you see the involvement, directly or indirectly, of government structures in the violence that is being experienced in communities, then it is difficult. But it also creates that space for women to intensify their advocacy to hold government accountable for the implementation of 1325.
All right, thank you so much, Mrs. Okon. This is the Women of 1325 right here on WFM 91.7. We are speaking on women, indigenous structures, and peace building. My name is Kiki Mordi. And right here on the program, we have our guest, the Executive Director, Kebekache Women Development and Resource Center, Mrs. M.M. Okon, speaking on this. We've established the role of the indigenous people and how violence and conflict affects them, and the women most especially. The phone lines are officially open. You can call us up right now on 07000 917 917 or on 090 256 You can send us a text or a WhatsApp message to 070-317-56537. And of course, you can tweet at us at WFM917. Use the correct hashtags, Women Radio 91.7, and of course, Women of 1325. Okay, so we have spoken at length on structures that have been put in place, peace and how it affects women, especially indigenous women. And today, International Day of Indigens, right? So there are indigenous methods of conflict resolution, and there are lessons to be learned from the indigenous methods. It stresses the need for fostering a spirit of peace and mutual respect. I feel like we can all sense it when we are in our communities. We can see that individual respect, mutual respect, spirit of peace, of community, of family, both as individuals and as a group. And then when there's time of peace, we can feel it fostering. But when there's time of conflict, it's also a way to pass conflicts around. People take sides, people deserve rights, people protect their families. And that's why it's important to foster peace as opposed to conflict. Now, it was effectively ensured through the institution of a Council of Elders and age-set organizations. As you mentioned, age grade, all the organizations that we have in these communities. And elders played an important role in diffusing conflicts within and between societies. All right, we have this right now at a national and international level, right? We have ministers, we have ambassadors, but would we want to see women representation in this Council of Elders? Do we have a Council of Elders that have women sitting in, trying to mediate, taking decisions, trying to counsel? So far, so good. In the indigenous communities we have in Nigeria, how many can boast of having that inclusion and representation of women within their councils? Hello, Mrs. Okon. Yes. How many how many indigenous people have, women on their council of elders who help in mediating for peace?
It's not much, but I know that in few cases here we have intervened in Bayelsa State.
Okay.
One of the women that have been trained by WANET was appointed a member of the customary courts.
Okay.
She's a woman leader in the community. And also in several communities, we have women who have been given chieftaincy title. But in most cases, it does not really translate to power. And in most cases, we don't have women as members of the chief in council.
And elders.
But a certain structure is usually created for women, female chiefs, and they can use their powers and influence the traditional rulers' council.
Okay.
We still know that the tradition is there, where women are not involved in those processes. But having the council of female chiefs is an opportunity. It's a tool that can be exploited. So they should use their powers to ensure that they influence the other components of the community governance system. Most of the time, if we look at the community governance structures, we have the women group, we have the youth group, and every other structure. And if we really have to assess the sphere of influence, that of the women is usually very small. But then, women can still use that space that they have to influence the other groups and decision-making bodies within the community. They still have the powers as mothers. They still have the powers as wives.
Okay.
That is the main power that people think, they influence things from behind. But then we also want that official recognition. Then you also know that the elderly women in communities can also have some level of influence.
Okay.
The eldest woman in the community can also be used to influence the council of chiefs or the traditional rulers. It could take time, but it can be
like
done.
the Umuada in the Igbo community.
Yes.
Okay.
So those are the structures that can actually be used in advocacy to influence peace-building processes.
Okay.
And in communities where you have communal clashes, for example, in those days we used to have the Jaw and the Shakiri fight. And women we intermarry. The Jaw women are being married by Shakiri women. Shakiri women are also married by
Ijaw men. Yes.
And when there is communal clash, it is the women that suffer most. Because it is like you are now an enemy to your people, you are an enemy to your husband's people. And most women are traumatized because you don't really know which way to support. And in such scenarios, it is the women that will make peace. Because the women from both communities can come together and engage the different community governance system or indigenous governance system to ensure that there is peace. If we look at the women action in 2002, in Warri, when women took over the Chevron oil tank farm and then the Abitaye flow station, and then there was a joint action in Warri by the Ijaw women, the Shakiri women, and the Ilaje women. And at that time, these are ethnic groups that were in conflict with one another. But the women from those different ethnic groups came together and took that action. And it was very powerful.
All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Okon. Now, we have a growing population. 175 million inhabitants and still counting. Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation. And with all of that comes migration, interstate migration, intercultural migration. And, there is this drive for a lot of us to want to build ourselves up to international standard. Lagos, for example, would always use Lagos as an example, have put out a plan to become that mega city. So while the development takes place, in many ways, this development, erases a lot of cultural heritage of indigenous people. So while we're celebrating today as International Day of Indigenous People, we have to remember that we are facing a violent erasure of tradition and culture. While some of those cultures are disempowering and disenfranchising, especially to women, some of those cultures also uphold women. Now, are we looking at a human rights issue? Is there what's the impact on all of this on the human rights of the indigenous people?
Anywhere, from whatever perspective you look at it, the rights of indigenous people are always being violated and abused. Because most times the indigenous people are always in the minority.
Okay.
And they are also poor people, and they do not have as much power and control like the people who are coming to invade them will have. Like the case you have painted, the government is powerful. The government has the security machinery, which they can actually use to overrun the indigenous people.
Okay.
So in most cases,
they're disenfranchised.
They're always at a position of disadvantage, which is the reason that corporations or the dominant groups always want to take over their resources and their land.
And their
so
land.
Their right to land is being violated. Their right to health is being violated. Their rights, economic rights, political rights, because in most cases they are not part of decision-making processes. If they have that power and influence in decision-making processes, then they will be able to resist.
All right, I'll hold your thoughts for a moment. We have a caller. Hello, good afternoon. All right, we lost that call. Okay. Please go ahead. Hello? Mrs. Okon, please go ahead. Hello, good evening. Good afternoon. What's your name and where are you calling me from?
Good afternoon, Kiki.
Yes, please tell me your name and where you're calling from.
This is Mommy Favor calling from Lewis.
All right, Mommy Favor, welcome to the program.
Hello?
Yes, Mommy Favor, welcome to
Hello?
the program. Okay, I think we have a slight network challenge. Of course, we are still speaking on today, International Day of the Indigenous People. We are speaking on women, indigenous structures and peace building on the program, Women of 1325. And of course, we have our guest in the studio, Mrs. Okon, who is the General Executive Director of Kebbi Kache Women Development and Resource Center. Hello, good afternoon. What's your name and where are you calling me from? Hello? All right. We seem to have a network challenge and we'll be connecting with our guests in a short while. But in the meantime, you can send your tweet in at WFM917. Use the hashtag Women of 1325. We've spoken on the growing population of Nigeria, one of the most popular black nations, and how these population bursts somehow affects indigenous people who still have the original culture, who want to exist and practice culture the way they know how to, and how conflicts arise, disagreements, both violent and non-violent conflict, and how this affects peace and security. And of course, call us up on 07000 917 917 to make your contributions. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon, Kiki.
Good afternoon. Your name and where you're calling from?
This is Mommy Favor calling from Lewis.
All right, Mommy Favor, welcome to the program. All right, go ahead and make a contribution.
Yeah, the other line is not working, please.
Okay.
Yeah,
Apologies for that.
Nah, thank you very much. Now, I want to ask a question. Indigenous, like what you mentioned, I think whether your guest mentioned about Sheki and the Ijaws fighting themselves. And, the thing got me, I'm surprised about it because I'm in Nigeria, we call ourselves one Nigeria. I see many people will be fighting each other and it will extend up to the extent that it will go down to our children, like in Delta State now, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, the Ijaws and the Hobo from Alaja, they were fighting themselves seriously, killing people there over just the land. So please, I don't know what the government is doing about it. Please, they should try to bring peace so that this will not affect our children. That is my contribution.
All right, thank you so much. And, it's a genuine fear as a woman living in Nigeria, as a mother, to have fears like that, because a lot of intertribal, intercommunal marriages go on. So it's important that peace is a huge conversation at the family level and at the government level. Hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Kiki, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Your name and where you're calling me from?
Mamina, 62 for Charity Road, New Koba Boulevard.
60s, welcome to the program. All right, go ahead and make...
Kiki, what Mommy Favor said was true. That second number, not the work.
All right, apologies for that. We'll just stick to the...
Well, as for me, I just called in to appreciate you because in saying about the problem of this government of the team, I only have prayer because if I complain from now to December, no achievement, not to see the same. So I'll just continue to put them in positivity and keep praying for them that Nigeria is a country that we are going to see enjoy later. It's just a matter of time.
All
right. So we in Abuja enjoying your program now.
Thank you so much, Sixties. Thank you very much. And I would like to welcome back our guest, Mrs. Okon. Welcome back, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So we had a call from Favor, Mommy Favor. She's asking, why do communities have conflict?
Why do communities have
conflict?
Why do communities have conflict?
Yes.
Conflict is actually a normal thing to have conflict, but the kind of conflict that we experience in communities most times are violent. At times it is intra-community conflict. At times it is inter-community conflict. And if you look at some of those conflicts, some is resource-based conflicts. What you experience here, it could be resources that one community lay claim to, that it is their own. It could also be land disputes, that one community will claim a particular portion of land is their own. And if it is not well managed, then it will result in violent conflict. Conflict could also be value-based, when certain values are not being upheld by certain groups in the community. And then there could also be issues of power tussle within the community by some leaders. To the leadership tussle, where more than one group or more than one faction is laying claim to either the chieftaincy tool or a particular leadership position. So there are a lot of causes of conflict in the community. But then we are talking about community structures for peace building.
Yes,
it is left for community members and peace advocates within the community to exploit these peace building structures or the community governance structures in the community to be able to manage whatsoever disagreement or conflict or misunderstanding that arises in the community, so that the conflict will not escalate into violence.
Okay, so you mentioned that there are these structures, these these mechanisms for conflict resolutions. They exist, but is there anything we can do to improve upon these mechanisms?
There are a lot of to improve upon it. There should be capacity building training, because even when the different groups know their roles and responsibilities in securing lives and properties in the community, some people could just default in not carrying out their roles and responsibilities, which is why other groups within the community can engage with the leadership structure to say they are supposed to do this to keep peace in the community. So it is always good to train them to improve on their either peace building processes, or for them to acquire more skills in resolving the conflict. Then it's also good to promote dialogue between different groups in the community. When something is wrong, for discussion will go a long way to address the violence and prevent it from escalating. There could also be advocacy and campaign by either civil society organization or faith-based groups. Faith-based groups are also
villages
in the community. It could be the traditional system, it could be the Christianity or any form of faith or religious group within the community. They also have their roles in promoting peace within the community. But in all these, women have a critical role to play, because when we look at family, when we look at community, even though women are excluded from decision-making processes, women are strategically positioned to mediate peace and engage with different warring factions within the community to promote peace.
Mediate, appease, and engage. Thank you so much, Mrs. Ememukun. Of course, we have been speaking to the Executive Director, Kebbi Women Development and Resource Center. It's 15 minutes to 4. This is Women of 1325, right here on Women Radio 91.7. My name is Kiki Mordi, and today we are talking on women, indigenous structures, and peace building. The conversation is ongoing right now. The hashtag is Women of 1325. If you're on Twitter, you want to check that out. And of course, the phone lines are open. Call us up on 07000 917 917. If you're unable to get through to that one, you can call us up on 090 256 25455. Text and WhatsApp 070 317 56537. So we all have a role to play. You have mentioned some of the existing mechanisms and structures that have been put in place for conflict resolution and what can be improved on this. Now, everyone has a role to play. You said women have a role to play, faith-based organizations have a role to play. How about we itemize all of these roles as people, right? As people, as non-governmental organizations, and then as the government. But we'll work our way up from the government moving forward what should be done, and then non-governmental organizations?
I think we should also look at the media, like the role your station is playing right now.
Okay.
The role your station is playing right now is also promoting the role of the media. Then we can also look at how the media is reporting events.
All right.
The media could report incidents in such a way that it could promote conflict. The media could also report incidents in such a way that it could promote understanding and peace.
All right. I'm going to hold your thought for a moment, and we talk to the scholar. Hello. Good evening. Hello. Okay, we seem to have lost that call. Please go ahead, ma'am. The role of the media in framing these stories.
Yes. It's very important. We can look at the various levels of media, even also at the indigenous level. They also have their traditional media, including the town crier and other levels of communication within the country. They have their own way of promoting peace and they don't fuel violence. So understanding the dynamics of communication and the dynamics of relationship between different groups in the community goes a long way.
Okay, we seem to have lost a bit of volume on you. If you could speak up. Thank you. All right, go ahead, ma'am.
I was talking about the role of traditional media. Different communities have their traditional media, the way they communicate with different groups within the community, between the community leadership and other groups within the community. These media channels also have their own roles and contributions towards promoting peace in the community.
All right. Besides the media, what other roles are left unfilled? What other roles do people have to play? The non-governmental organization, advocates, the role of the men as well.
Yes, a lot of groups. We also need to be reporting and documenting the peace initiatives from different groups, because when it is documented, many other communities and groups can learn from what the others are doing, or promoting learning exchange, so that you look at how other communities are engaging with their issues, and it can also be replicated in another instance to promote peace building. There should actually be a lot of solidarity building and alliance building between different groups, so that one group might not be able to achieve something, but a lot of groups come together, a lot of stakeholders coming together can pull resources and ideas together and take action to promote peace.
Partnership, okay. And before we let you go, ma'am, would you say education has a role to play in this?
Can you say that again?
Would you say education has a role to play in peace building of indigenous
people? Yes. Definitely. If we look at sustainable development goals, nobody should be left behind. At least everybody should have that basic education, which is the responsibility of government and also the responsibility of other critical stakeholders within the society. And when we talk about women, we always say that the majority of the women do not have access to education. So it is the responsibility of government, it is the responsibility of non-governmental organizations to ensure that women have access to education. It actually plays a critical role in peace building, because with education, the understanding level of community members goes beyond what would have caused conflict or promoted misunderstanding.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Okon. Do you have any final words for us on the topic for the day?
What I would really want to say is that the 1325 is not a document that we should just have and keep. It has to be implemented. And in the various national action plan, every stakeholder in the society has a role to play to promote peace. and also to involve women in peace building. So in whatever we do, we should recognize the fact that women are critically, strategically positioned to make peace and to promote peace. So we should do in our own little space, we should contribute to ensuring that there is peace and tranquility in the family, in the community. In fact, when there is peace in the family, that can also translate to the larger society.
All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. O'Connor. Thanks for your insights given today on the program. Nigeria's current transformation must take into account its ethnic as well as structural diversity, and in order to build a lasting, stable society, different governance and cultural perspectives must be integrated, and this can be done through comprehensive, cross-cutting peace building initiatives. I beg your pardon. It includes humanitarian assistance, development, as well as protecting the lives and providing psychosocial support and trauma healing to citizens, especially women and children affected by violence. It's against this backdrop that the women of 1325 have come to provide a framework for the protection of women and inclusion of gender perspective in peace building. Women of 1325 is sponsored by WANEP, West African Network for Peace Building, with support from the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, NORAD. Women in Peace Building Network, WITNET. Women of 1325 holds every Tuesday on Women Radio 91.7 by 3 p.m. And I'd like to say a big thank you to the producers, Kels Okezie, Blessing Kale, and Anthony Dalmeda. My name is Kiki Mordi. Until next week, good afternoon.
We are Nigeria's first female-centric radio station for women and families. WFM 91.7.
Our world is threatened by terrorism, wars, killings, and various vices. Its effects are mostly felt by women and girls. Peace and security is a collective responsibility as it concerns women, girls, and boys. Join WANEP on Women of 1325 every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on Women Radio WFM 91.7 as we engage on issues of women, peace, and security. Women of 1325 on Women Radio WFM 91.7.
WFM 91.7.